In part 1 of this video series, Evan and I installed all the major parts into a new PC case. But right now, it's basically just a very expensive box of parts. Evan had to head out of town, so I'm finishing wiring everything up, cleaning up the cables, and getting the system ready to run. In this video, we'll walk through clean wiring, setting up the BIOS, and installing Windows so this machine can finally come to life. Let's see if we did everything right. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Ryan, and welcome to the Bonding Blueprint. So, Evan and I talked off camera on the way to hockey. He was really excited to start the build, but once we got into it, the build was pretty boring for him. So, Evan's now traveling with his mom for school break all week. I was planning to wait until he got back to finish the build, but my return window for some of these parts expires this week. He doesn't want to do the wiring and wants me to wrap it up so he can have his new machine ready when he gets back. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the build myself so I can make sure that none of the parts need to be returned. Even though he got bored and doesn't want to continue with the build, I still think it's important for kids to learn how technology works. Computers shouldn't just feel like some mystery box where you plug in things and pictures magically appear. But now when I say things like processor, RAM, or hard drive, he'll hopefully have an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, one thing that I did place in off camera was this graphics card holder. So you can see how much wiggle room there is on that graphics card. And realistically, it's really being only held into place by the screws that Evan put in on the side and that back PCI slot that holds, that the graphics card connects to the motherboard on. And so what this is, so you can, let me get that into focus. It's got a screwdriver attachment to it. It's got some thread measurement ticks on it. So once you figure out what size you need in between your computer case and the graphics card, you can kind of just put it in there, lift up on the card gently, and it's just there to help brace the card, take some of the weight off of the motherboard and the brackets on the side and help support the overall graphics card. Okay, so when I am wiring up, I usually like to go and start with the largest wires first and work my way back. The big braided cables, these massive cables here, they're just thick. They take up a lot of space. I like to put those in place first, and the smaller wires, typically you can weave them in and out of those bigger ones. So typically I'll just go ahead and start with the motherboard power. And then there's usually one or two of these powers up here, and that's what supplies power directly to the processor. So this is what the cable will probably look like. Big, long, power cable here, and then this is the side that plugs into the power supply. Every power supply is going to be a little different. The little modular cables are different, so hard to say exactly what yours will look like. And depending on your motherboard brand and power supply, you may have one of these for the CPU, you may have two of these. This is a pretty new board, and the first time I've seen two of the processor powers on the board. Plug these in first on the front, and I like to try to flatten them out. I may get some, you can make like really nice, clean, probably even like these braided cable styles. You can make some nice clean cables out of them, but this will do for now. And they're white, so they kind of go with the motif of the case. Most of these, when you press them in, just kind of weave them back and forth a little bit. You don't have to really force feed them. And then just make sure they kind of click into place. And that little latch, the locking latch here, in the back is kind of in place. Now this one's easy. This one kind of, I just tuck this one straight around to the side and feed it into the back of the case. And again, once it's plugged into the motherboard, be careful not to tug on it too much. You really don't want to rip that off. So I'm gonna just kind of gently kind of squeeze that so it kind of bends nicely around the side, and then I'll fasten that up a little better around the backside once I get to it. And then same thing, I'm just gonna go ahead and just plug these CPU powers in quickly. Send that right over the top of the board. There's a nice opening in this case. I like all the wire openings in this case. Really nice case for good wire management. Ultimately, the goal is to keep all of the wiring as out of this section of the case as much as possible. One for, well, build aesthetics. Nobody wants to see a bunch of wires. And again, just kind of push it back and forth until it kind of clicks into place. And that's one of them. top. And again, just be careful not to bend the power plug holders on the board. Like I'm pushing on the wire itself, trying to take all the tension off of the little plastic, the plastic end there, the black plastic end. So there we go. Got them nice and tucked up right behind the fan there. You barely notice they're there, right? I mean, you can barely see that from the outside, so that's great. That's ideal. This one, it's a little harder to bend. That one will tuck up nicely in there. Won't take up a lot of space. I've got the big wire here pulled out to the back and run up top. And as you can see, it's plugged in right here to the top of the power supply. Okay, all right, so what I did is I took the big thick wire and I went ahead and routed it, snuck it in there along that back edge, and just kind of kept it out of the way so I can still almost get a lot of top-down access to the top of the power supply. Okay, so one thing I want to do just really quick, because I need to get it out of my way, is this little pigtail for this case fan right here. I want to run this up and in between the radiator and the case and out the back, and then I will attach to that later and wire it up. But I just kind of want to get it out of the way. It's hanging down, it's bothering me. So I'm just gonna move the fan up really quick and we will be back. Okay, all right, so I don't even know if you can see right up in there. You probably could if I take the camera and get right in there. So just kind of fed the wires out the back, and they're just kind of pigtailed hanging out the back. I've got a couple of other big wires here that I need to account for. One is this one. It's kind of like a long braided cable. Let's see if I can get it to focus. This one, it's a long braided cable, and then kind of branches off into a couple different plugs here at the end. And this is for the radiator control. It's actually going to control the radiator as well as the pump and the cooling system and the fans and all of that. So we plug the one wire here into the top middle, and that just plugs in right up there in the upper middle. Now, obviously, if you don't have this exact cooler, your plugs are going to be a little different. You might only want to have, you can get them with just a fan here for the cooling, and it's only going to be one or two wires going up into the cooling headers up there. There's a lot of different options here. So your mileage may vary depending on what it is you're building. And then the rest of this stuff, I think I'm going to be routing all of it behind the motherboard anyway. So we're going to feed these all back in here, and we'll figure out where they go. I already have a rough idea of where they go on the motherboard, but we'll need to route them behind the motherboard. And then as you're going to see, we're going to just slowly peek each cable out underneath the board, above the board, and they're just going to plug in. And if, you know, obviously I know where a lot of these things go, but if you don't know where they go, typically comes with a manual. This one just right on the front page has a lot of the locations of where you're going to plug everything in at. Okay, the next big one that I know has a massive cable is the graphics card. Now, this graphics card, this is a 5070 Ti, and it has only one power adapter on here. And it's a different power adapter than you've seen on older generation cards if you've built computers in the past. And there's new power supplies have special, come on, focus for me, focus, have special power adapters where it only requires one cable. I'll probably show some video of my other computers in the house. Older cards would have 2 or 3 ports on them for power, and you'd have to run 2 or 3 different power cables to the graphics card. They've streamlined it a little bit, but if you have an older power supply that doesn't have this new shiny all-in-one cable, and you have older power supply and all you're doing is upgrading the graphics card comes, come on, focus, you can do it, buddy, you can do it. Yeah, it comes with a 3-to-1 adapter. So you'd put the 3-to-1 adapter on here and then run your 3 pigtails from your power supply to power the graphics card. But since this is a new build with a new power supply, and I am fortunate enough to have the all-in-one cable, we are going to use that instead. Now, this one, I don't like going under the card because there's airflow that happens a lot under here. There's fans underneath the card. So typically I usually like to run this cable either up over the top of the graphics card and out the side, or sometimes I'll tight wrap it around the graphics card. In this case, since we've already got these big water cooling lines, I'm just gonna run it right out the top of the card. And as you get all the wires, and again, try to be gentle with these. These things are just soldered onto a circuit board, so you don't want to just like jam things in there. They are difficult to press in because they're meant to be super tight fit, but be careful with them just the same. And the nice thing about this is you do it once and you're pretty much done. It's unfortunate if you do all of this and you power up your computer and it doesn't work and you have to take it apart to get a part out, but that doesn't happen too often. I've built a lot of computers over the years and usually it's fairly successful. Now, my concern is this sticks out pretty far and it wouldn't matter which way I was routing this, really, to be honest. But what I'm concerned with is when the door goes back on the front, it's gonna press right up against that cable. This is a pretty big, so we're gonna bend that back while trying to just doing it to the cable itself, not the outlet. Okay, so I do know I'm going to need a SATA power. It's one of those. I'm gonna need one of those for the fans at the top. I know it's on the pigtail that came out of the radiator. So I know I'm gonna need one of these. With this computer, I don't need a lot of the wires. I mean, here, let's take a look at everything, right? These are all of the wires that the power supply came with, and we're not gonna use a lot of these. We're not gonna be using these kinds. They're like old school power supplies for like old fans. Obviously, your mileage may vary if you're building a different machine with different parts. Both of my hard drives are on board the motherboard, so I don't have to power those. Evan and I took this out at the beginning of the build video. There's a hard drive cage here. So if I had hard drives, I would be mounting, or I'd be running power supply down into those. Quick recap of what's going on in the case, right? So we've got the main motherboard power supply being this brick here. This is the processor's power supply, and the cords are ridiculously long for this. These are my fan wires for the exhaust fan on the side. I have extensions put on them for now because I need to run them to the motherboard, but the fans are probably going to be one of the last things that we do. I'm going to tuck all these cables up into the right. This is for the radiator power. And then this is my graphics card power, which I'm really just gonna route right up top there. Basically get all the big wire stuff up in the top except the pigtail coming off of the radiator. Then we will run front jacks for the PC and all the power switch controls and things like that. That's what all this is. Coming in from the front of the case, we'll route that to the motherboard. That's usually on the bottom and the sides. And then we'll wrap up the build. Quick addendum to what I just said and my original plan. I did not end up tucking all the wires in the back corner. I ended up kind of weaving them down and back and down and back all along that back area so I can kind of keep just this whole front section a little clearer. I did plug in a SATA power that I'm going to need for the radiator. So I ran that out the side here. So these wires will come right around the front here. What we're going to be doing next is pretty much daisy chaining our fans together. There's not enough outlets on the motherboard to plug 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the exhaust fan. There's not 6 outlets on the motherboard. And frankly, you don't really need to control each of these fans individually. You need to control the fans as an entire group. So we get 2 different types of wires here, and you'll only have 2 if you have RGB LED lights in your fans. If it's just a plain fan, you'll probably only have power. You're not going to have the RGB controller here. So we're gonna plug this fan into this fan, which then goes into this fan. And then at the end, we're gonna plug the extension cables that they came with, extension cables. And that's what we're going to actually run, just one set of cables to the motherboard. I'm going to do the same thing with these 2 bottom fans. I'm going to just kind of route those together and then we'll take the exhaust fan and run that into the motherboard once we're done. Okay, so we've got these fans all daisy chained together, and these 2, I'm gonna just leave alone for right now. They're nice and bundled up. They're kind of out of my way. These are just kind of sitting here, and what I wanna do is I want to route these wires. Now, I know that this one and this one are going to be on the motherboard right about somewhere around here. And these two, which is this one, front panel. These are the controls for the front panel that turn the power on and off, the reset button, etc. And then the audio panel jacks on the front. And those are all down here at the bottom of the motherboard. Now, I know this from experience, but you can also pull up your manual and it'll tell you front panel audio, the front panel system, and then over here is the USB and the USB, which were these two that I pointed out. This blue one is the USB 5 gig, and this one that has a cap on it so it doesn't get damaged is USB 20. This one is right over here, and then this one goes over here. And we'll come back and we'll clean up the backside here in a little bit. And then these two, they are going to sneak out, just peek them out the side, and there's plenty of slack there. Have the two cables, and so we've got the HD audio cable here, and you can't, while they look the same, 10-pin connectors, but as you can see, there's a pin blocker in a different spot. So you can't accidentally plug these into the wrong spot on the motherboard, just in case. Still gonna obviously pay attention to which way it goes, and you wanna watch which way the pin blocker is so you don't shove it on the jack in the incorrect way. See, this is where having a 10-year-old with small hands would come in incredibly handy. It's a little tight. Now, that one's plugged in, so I'm gonna just lightly feed that back in. Same thing, I need to see where the pin blocker is. Okay, so that one went right there. And that one over there. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and feed these wires right back in. That's perfectly fine. I'm gonna have a bunch of other wires coming up into all these bottom headers and tucking out the back. Okay, and as mentioned, we have these two. Now this one, this blue plug here has a little tiny tab on it right there, and that needs to make sure that that tab lines up with the tab on the jack. This one, I believe, is also, it's omnidirectional, it looks like, so it doesn't matter which way you put it in. Strange, but it does look that way. All right, so we'll just plug this one in. My old computer didn't have this jack. And again, I'm not gonna force this at all because I'm not 100% sure. And since it didn't go in that way, we're gonna try it this way, flip it around. This is probably, oh no, all right. So that definitely does have a clear directionality to it, so don't force it. And then those two wires kind of tuck back in nicely. Yeah, still fairly clean, and the air is gonna be coming in from the back and then out and out. That'll do. Okay, this is where we're gonna also start getting into some zip stripping just to kind of keep some of the wires from getting unruly. So in the back of the case are all these little attachment points, and you just take a zip strip, slide it through that loop. I don't know how well this is gonna show up on camera. Not exactly a lot of maneuverability here. So once you get that zip strip through that, and then at the end, I'll go through and I'll cut off all the little pigtails there. And I'm not gonna do the whole thing like normally if I was really wiring this or cleaning it, I'd put one there and kind of attach this to that side wall. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. Just trying to keeping things somewhat organized and in one place. Next, I'm going to wire up the radiator cooler. And so this has 4 different wires on the end. One, this plugs into the fan end over here. Sorry, that plugs into the fan end. This plugs into the SATA power, which I ran down over here. And this is a USB power, which is going into the bottom of the motherboard here. This top one here, that goes into the all-in-one pump jack to control the pump up in the top of the motherboard. So we took that pigtail. I've got the small wire here running up and out to the motherboard, which we will plug in here shortly. And then from here, I did hook up the 2 jacks I was just talking about, which is the fan control that's attached to the radiator. And then this is the SATA power that I plugged in, and the other SATA power jacks that are part of the pigtail coming off of here. There's 4 of them. I only needed 1, but what can you do? So there you go. Oh, and I also ran the USB power for the radiator down here to the front. As mentioned, we've got this cable up at the top, which is the controller wire for the all-in-one pump, which goes into the all-in-one pump spot. And yes, there are 4 pins on the motherboard and only 3 pins on the cable, and that is perfectly fine. There is a guide on the plug, so it can only go into the correct pins. So once you get that in there, Okay, more tight quarters here, but now we've got the USB power, and I do know that these two are the USBs. Again, check the manual if you're not sure. And there is a pin out placement, so be aware of that. And again, just short wire runs. I want to try to keep it invisible. All right, so I took the two bottom fans and I just I've got the two runs that are gonna go out to the motherboard, and then everything else I just kind of attached together, daisy chained them together, and then just left it kind of floating at the bottom, zip tied together. I will, once I attach these to the motherboard, I'll tidy this all up. Same with these. And also I had the jumper wires actually backwards. I had to run them in the reverse order, so I just switched that because the ends that go onto the motherboard I had reversed. So whoops. Over here, the exhaust fan in the back, I'm going to actually run, because I have an extra extension cable, but I think I actually want to run this back fan separately to the motherboard for control. That way I can isolate if I want to turn up the back fan to exhaust more air, or turn up the intake to push more air into the case. I have those two things separate. So I am now going to go ahead and run these wires around the bottom and down there, so I can then plug these in, and then that's it. We'll show you the final build. This is the back all finished up. So we've got all the wires. We ran them all up top instead of bunching them up in the corner. Ran them all down the side. I did move this wire over in case I want to put the hard drive cage back in at some point, if I maybe want to add some super large capacity SSDs. There we go. All the wires down at the bottom. Inside of here, we've pretty much got all of that stuff nice and hidden. You see how they kind of tuck up right underneath and go back. Same with all those wires. Not a huge fan of all of that, but you know, I want liquid cooling, and that's the pain you have to pay. All right, so there we go. All that's done. And then now, right, so as we talked about, there's the HD audio here. Then we've got the fan power, and it's actually for the fans right here. That's the power, and then that's the RGB for these fans. And then this is the RGB for the intake fans and the power, and that's for those fans back in there. And then we've got that's the USB, blocking the light again. That's the USB for the radiator fan. And then that's the HD audio down there at the end, or sorry, the front panel controls right there, which turn on the computer and everything like that. So that is it for wiring and building. Now we're going to get it into the office, plug it in, and make sure it works before we close it all up and do the next steps. All right, moment of truth time. I appropriated Evan's desk since he's on vacation traveling in Florida with his mom. I have a spare keyboard and mouse I had kicking around, so I've got those plugged in. It's all plugged in. I have not pushed the power button and tested this off camera yet. So I gotta turn the switch on in the back. Moment of truth. That's usually a good sign. It's very pretty. It's very bright. Luckily, I can rotate the screen on the cooler in the software. So, made it into the BIOS, another good sign. I still have to check through some of the other stuff, make sure it's all working. Definitely not the best way to do this, but here we go. Good news, it recognizes both hard drives, so that's fantastic. It recognizes both RAM sticks, also fantastic. The two intakes and the pump looks like it's running, and the fans on the graphics card are turned on. It recognizes the motherboard, it recognizes the processor properly. Everything looks pretty good. Memory looks good. All right, so good sign. Everything turned on. BIOS recognized all the hardware inside of the computer, so that's a great signal that I have working parts in the machine itself. So good stuff. Next steps. I'm going to check the BIOS version, see if there's a much newer BIOS version, and if there is, I will probably flash the BIOS. I usually do it when I first get a computer. For those that don't know, sorry, and Evan, because he'll be watching this back since he's not here. The BIOS is basically the instructions that come on the motherboard storage stores these instructions, and it tells the motherboard how to interact with all the different parts. This is where you can overclock, which means to increase the speed of the processor and things like that outside of how it comes, and that requires some extra cooling and things like that. We're not going to get into all of those things, but anyway, the BIOS are basically the instructions on how to interact with all the different parts in the machine. And when the motherboard was made, some of these parts might not have existed. So let's say the graphics card came out after the motherboard was manufactured. It might not know how to recognize that graphics card without potentially flashing the BIOS. And that's just a weird example. There's a lot of reasons why you want to flash your BIOS, but usually it's just for compatibility reasons. It's just like doing a Windows update or a security update in Windows or something like that. Okay, I'm going to record this really quick just to show you the rough process on how to flash a BIOS. Every motherboard company and different motherboard is going to be a little different, so your mileage may vary, but this should be the general steps. So in order to get the new BIOS file that you need to put on the computer, you need to go to your manufacturer's website for your motherboard. In this case, I have an Asus motherboard, and this is the page, and you're going to want to navigate to the support section of that motherboard. And then from here, you're looking for something that says driver and tools, driver and BIOS, anything like that, your file downloads. And then as you can see here, there's a section for BIOS and firmware. And then once it loads up, you're going to see, and again, your mileage may vary. It's different with different websites, but this is the BIOS file that I need for this motherboard. So I'm going to download that file. Okay, so once I've downloaded the file, there's probably some sort of instruction. Now, in this case, I need to rename my file using a renamer tool that comes packaged with the BIOS. And that's as simple as put it in a folder, extract the zip file, and then run the renamer. That's it. And it will rename your file to be this A5570.cap. And then you copy that file to a blank thumb drive with only this file on it. With the BIOS file that I downloaded from the Asus website, put it on a thumb drive, put it in, and then once you're inside the BIOS, you come down here to advanced mode, and then right up here under tool, I believe it is, and then there's the Easy Flash 3 utility, and you click into that. Once you click into that, it pretty much usually auto points you to the drive that has the BIOS file on it. And once you find that file, you click on that file name and an important notice pops up. This notice just means that if you've set up a BitLocker security key, you need to have the recovery key set up before flashing your BIOS. I haven't done that, so I am fine with that. You just hit yes and yes. And so it's asking me if I really want to update the BIOS, and I really do, because this BIOS file that's on here was really old back in January of 2025. More than a year old, definitely want to update the BIOS to get the newest drivers and everything set up. So we're going to say yes, and then it's going to do its thing, shut off, turn on, turn on, turn off. All right, so it just cycled the power, came back into the BIOS, back into the flash screen, and it is proceeding. And once we're back, we just want to make sure that the BIOS build date is the correct one from the file you installed, so you know it was installed correctly. Okay, common problem with new computer builds is your motherboard doesn't properly recognize the RAM. Now, my RAM is DDR5 6000. You'll see it now is currently set correctly here at the top. That is because I've now programmed the BIOS to recognize the memory and the RAM sticks that are inside. The Expo setting for me did not work. It would cause the computer to endlessly reboot. So I had to manually set the RAM timing. So your mileage may vary. Setting the Expo here to enabled, even though it correctly pulled up what my RAM is, it didn't set it properly. I keep this as disabled. I go over to advanced mode, in here to AI tweaker, and a couple of spots where you want to make some changes. One is changing your memory frequency to the correct DDR5 6000, and then under DRAM timing control. So originally I had put in these numbers, 30, 36, 36, 36, 96 here in this box, in the auto box. And then now that it actually rebooted correctly, it recognizes the RAM is properly set. Other thing that I needed to do is turn down gear down mode it to enabled. So down here at the bottom, one of the things that was causing a problem, causing the computer to constantly reboot, is the memory voltage. So I had to change the CPU SoC voltage to 1.3 under the manual mode. This RAM voltage was set to 1.35 on both of these and rebooted, and it seemed to take all of those settings. It now properly recognizes my memory frequency, and everything is now set up exactly how I want it to be. So now I can start installing Windows since I know these settings work. Okay, so in order to install Windows on your new computer, first you need to actually create a Windows 11 installation media. So take a USB thumb drive and put it into a working computer, any computer that you have, and come to this address up here, Microsoft.com. I'll put the link down below in the description. And then here under Create Windows 11 Installation Media, you want to download this media creation tool. You do not want to use the installation assistant. That is if you wanted to install or reinstall Windows on the machine that you're currently on. We want to install this on a new machine, so create the installation media. So you'll download that tool. After you've downloaded the file, it'll be either up here in your download history or in your downloads location, wherever you downloaded it, and you'll click on that executable file. It'll come up with the typical Windows setup, so you're just going to accept through a couple of these menus. You want to tell it what you're installing, which is Windows 11, and you're going to want to uncheck this box for use the recommended options for this PC because we're installing this on a different PC. Then come down here and hit next, and you're going to install that onto a USB flash drive. You will need one with at least 8 gigabytes of space. And then once that USB flash drive is in the machine, go ahead and hit next. I'm not going to be burning the file to a DVD. And then here you'll select your USB drive that you want to install Windows to and hit next. From here, it's going to download Windows 11 and install it on the thumb drive. I'll be back when it's done. Okay, that process takes just about 15 to 20 minutes, at least on my computer. And the progress bar does freeze from time to time. It might get stuck at 70% for a couple minutes. Don't feel like it froze and stopped working. It's just thinking. Wait till it gets all the way here to the end. It'll say your USB flash drive is ready. Hit finish, and then it'll clean up some files on your computer to get rid of them. And then you can take the thumb drive out and put it into your new PC. Okay, once you've got the media creation tool has installed Windows on your thumb drive, you put the thumb drive into the computer in any USB slot, and then you're going to restart. So it'll reboot again likely, and I want to make sure I hit F4 to boot from the USB. Here we go. And so now you're in your Windows setup, and it's fairly simple. Choose your language, time and currency, keyboard, and you want to install, and you'll type in your product key. And then from there, I typed in the product key, hit accept. It's going to look for which disk it wants to install Windows on. Now, in this case, I have 2 drives in my system. One of them is a 2 terabyte drive, which is meant to be my Windows drive and games, and a 4 terabyte drive, which is going to be for editing footage. So I want to make sure I choose the 1.8, or in this case, it's 2 terabyte drive, but some of that is partitioned off for other stuff. So I am going to go ahead and say, yes, install Windows. Not going to keep recording the rest of the Windows installation. At this point, you just follow a couple prompts until Windows is done, and then update all your drivers, update your machine, install your software, and use it like you would a regular computer.
Hey everyone, I'm back from vacation and my new computer is ready.
Quick update since the last time you saw us building this. The new computer is officially finished, it powered on first try, and Windows installed without any issues. Plus, this video will be edited on the new computer. So overall, the build was a success, and thankfully we didn't have to return any parts.
Which I was really happy about because I thought I was going to break something.
No, you did great. You listened well, you moved carefully, and you installed a lot of the big parts.
I liked putting some of the big stuff in, but the wiring looked like it wouldn't be very fun for me, so I was happy to let Dad do that part. But now I know a lot more about the parts inside the computer.
And that's honestly my favorite part of this whole build. Not just ending up with a powerful computer, which is awesome, but making sure he understands how it works instead of just feeling like some mystery box that does cool stuff. As always, if you enjoyed this build, hit that like button to see more projects like this.
If you like seeing families build, game, and learn together, you should subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.